Welcome to state and local financing for community land trusts. And I'm very honored to be presenting our speakers for today. We have Liliana Lomeli, Co-op Housing Outreach and Development Specialist at the California Center for Co-op Development. We also have Betsy McGovern, and she is with the Bakersfield CLT. It's a new CLT that's getting seeded by the city of Bakersfield. We have Jarrod Russell, Executive Director of the Community Land Trust Association of West Marin, CLAM, member of the West Marin Housing Collaborative. And I'll be facilitating this panel. We will talk about some of the origin stories for these community land trusts and community ownership developments. And we will be highlighting three developments. Comunidad Nuevo Lago. This is a mobile home community with 60 homes that was featured in our bus tour, in one of our bus tours yesterday. Formerly, it was known as Shady Lakes Mobile Home Park. We'll also be featuring CLAM developments from living room conversations about buying the organization's first acquisition to, which was a single family home, to 54 unit tax credit project. And we will be elaborating on the partnership with the city of Bakersfield and self-help enterprises for 14 new affordable homes for local families. Please, hand of applause for our speakers who work very hard on this workshop. This is the geography of some of the, some of these three locations. Comunidad Nuevo Lago is in Fresno. Bakersfield CLT is in Bakersfield, and CLAM works out of Marin. And I'll hand it over to Liliana.
Great. Hi, good morning. So my name, as Lydia mentioned, is Liliana. I work for the California Center for Cooperative Development, and we're located in Davis, California. And I work for our housing program, Cali Rock. So I am their housing outreach and development specialist. But we support all kinds of cooperatives, whether that be agricultural, worker, shared services, child co-ops, child care co-ops. But primarily in our housing program, we focus on manufactured home parks as well as traditional limited equity housing. These are set up as resident-owned communities. You'll hear me refer to them as ROCs, and I'll go into them on a little bit more on the next slide. And what we do is we provide technical assistance both in the pre-purchase stages, so that includes navigating the deal, helping residents incorporate, establishing governing documents, and then also post-purchase during that transition from residents to owners. Roles and responsibilities. Thank you. Roles and responsibilities, financial literacy, contracting with third-party vendors, all that good stuff. So as I mentioned, ROCs, resident-owned communities, they really do sustain mobile home parks as a source of affordable housing. So often we talk about new avenues for creating affordable housing. And although that is still a very important conversation, it's crucial to acknowledge that there is already forms of affordable housing, mobile home parks being one of them, and it's a matter of preserving them. So the way this works, just to give a brief background, the residents form a corporation to purchase the land while they still own their homes individually. And living in a cooperative means that residents, again, they own the land together, they operate at cost, they're not looking to make a profit, just enough to maintain operations and to provide capital improvements. They also have a direct voice in decision making. And long term, this creates stability and protects against displacement and also creates long term investments in their homes and their communities. Also in California, I know they talked about this in a workshop yesterday, but just to give a little bit of a reminder, we have the California Limited Equity Housing Cooperative Statute. which really outlines that they must be organized and set up as a nonprofit corporation. This means that they're governed 100% by the residents. So their board of directors is 100% voluntary residents that are serving. Um, the members, again, they own the co-op together, but they have the rights to occupy their specific unit. And they are required to remain affordable long term. And when we combine this, when conventional constructions, they can be combined with a CLT, where the LEHC is owned and governed by the residents and the land is owned by the CLT. Because this works because both models have that long-term affordability constraint. So I know most of you know that good stuff already, and you're wanting to know, how do we actually make this happen? And let's hear about stories where they actually made this happen. So if you were able to attend the bus tour yesterday, one of the options was Comunidad Nuevo Lago. They are a local Fresno mobile home park. This is a 60-unit community made up of residents that are primarily Spanish speakers, farm workers, and have been residents of that community for decades. They were unfortunately in a really bad situation with their previous owner, who was constantly raising rents, uh, harassing residents, threatening to evict residents over any little thing, just being very neglectful of the park and the residents. So CRLA was actually able to step in and after relationship with the community and being able to help them through some of the lawsuits that were going on at the time, they referred them to CCCD. And I do want to note that this is kind of a crisis situation. This is not the ideal entry point for a cooperative purchase. Unfortunately, this does happen though, where there's owners that are just not great owners of the park, and residents are looking to take matters into their own hands. What we would ideally recommend is to make those relationships with owners of the parks, mom and pop parks, before they're looking to sell, so that you have a better chance, an opportunity of purchasing the park for a more affordable price. Unfortunately, although that's ideally what we would suggest, the reality is we're typically against investors who are in a much better financial situation to purchase these multi-million dollar parks. So how do we win in that situation? And um, I'll go on to the next slide. Thank you. So we have a couple different pools that we look for funding. One being state and federal programs, the second being CDFIs, and occasionally public funding through like the county or city. So we have had success with CERNA, the Joe CERNA Farm Worker Housing Grant Program, as well as MORE, which was previously MPROP. And as much as we love grants and they're great, they are timely. Not only timely in the fact that you have to write the grant and submit the grant, but also timely in the fact that you have to sometimes wait a year before you actually receive funding, sometimes a year to just hear that you got the award. um, there's also some other things that you should be aware of. So CERNA, for example, it's something that you must be an escrow already in order to apply. So that's kind of a downside of that. A positive of MORE is that they also include rehab funds. So that's an option if people are looking for that. CDFIs, as I mentioned, somebody that we have a great working relationship with is Rock Capital. I will note that they only lend to mobile home parks. However, in this case, we were able to combine them with CERNA and MORE to purchase Comunidad Nuevo Lago, or for the residents to purchase Comunidad Nuevo Lago. And they were also able to provide them with a bridge loan in that waiting period for when CERNA and MORE are um, we're waiting for them to be awarded. There are some other great CDFIs that I've mentioned up there, and there are more. I just didn't want to fill the screen up with a whole bunch of words. I will also point out that there are some other programs that are worth looking into that I have up there. But again, as we know, these are things that can change from year to year depending on our political climate and whatnot. So as great as they are, we also have to acknowledge that they come with some constraints. So another key part of this deal, and I think most deals, and you guys know this, is the relationships. So as I mentioned, CRLA had already been working with the residents when they referred them to CCCD. I think what's so crucial about this is acknowledging the relationship they already built with the residents and the community and the history that they knew about them. I think it was very important for us to work closely with them throughout it instead of just kind of trying to step in and take it on, because trust takes time to build. And so that was a key part there. Another really helpful piece is the media. And I know there is definitely some skepticism with the media and also some fear, which is totally understandable. But I also want to point out that there is some benefits. And so even now that Comunidad Nuevo Lago has been operating for a year and a half, close to 2 years, we still get people saying, oh, we read about what the residents fought to do and we want to offer to help, or we know about this grant that they might be eligible for. They actually just got awarded $50,000 to help clean up their ranch area. So these are things that are continuously letting people aware of what's happening, or other residents to let them know this is possible. It happened near you. Let's see if we can do it at your park as well. Another example of some funds and a case where funding can be a little risky and we have to take into consideration what the compliance requirements might be are the CBDG funds that we were made aware that there were some CBDG funds for the purchase. But ultimately, Comunidad Nuevo Lago was advised by their attorneys to not take this money because one of the compliance criteria was that they might possibly ask for documentation status, and that's a risk that the community wasn't willing to take. So just paying attention to those little things that uh, funding is great and grants are great, but we have to pay attention to those little things as well that aren't so little. Um, then also again with relationships. So coalitions matter. When there's a problem that you're looking to solve, really getting together with other groups who are doing similar work. We have worked with RCAC, UCI. These continue to help the community. UCI has a legal clinic that provides free legal assistance to the community, and we're working with them for some other projects as well. And RCAC, other organizations that have maybe specific technical assistance funds for things that they're experts in, and acknowledging where other people have expertise and coming together to ultimately benefit the residents. That's what it's all for. And then lastly, just local governments. I think again, we find that they're the most responsive when you are looking to problem solve. But this could include even things like pro-housing funds, talking to your city, talking to your county officials, and seeing what might be available for the park. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jarrod.
I would also, just before we hand it over to Jarrod for the CLAM piece, I would also like to acknowledge two residents of Comunidad Nuevo Lago who are here with us today and who were instrumental in presenting to the tour yesterday about their experience in this, fight that they had to acquire their land so that they could remain with stable housing in the home that some of them have lived for more than 30 years. So Don Luis and Don Francisco, would you like to stand up? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. We really appreciate it. And I'll hand it over to Jarrod.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jarrod Russell, the Executive Director of CLAM, the Community Land Trust Association of West Marin. I don't know about you all, but I'm feeling so energized by that group photo that we took this morning. That was so much fun. I heard that dancing and karaoke was fun last night too. I turned into a pumpkin at like 8, so I could be more energetic for you all this morning. It's great to be with you. I'm a big fan of the Community Land Trust movement, as I think you all are too, since you're here. And I'll just tell you a little bit about Sam's origin story. Um, I've got a menu of options that we'll discuss today. I really want to hear your questions, most importantly. So just write those questions down as we go through some of the different topics. But, you know, it's interesting. The work that we have is a bit of a dichotomy, right? There's usually these sort of two opposing forces together. There's frustration and then there's opportunity or inspiration, right? And those two things together often are what help mobilize energy and resources. And CLAM's beginning was no different. Over 20 years ago, about 20 plus residents and volunteers in the Point Reyes Station area in West Marin were really frustrated with EAH housing that was supposed to be permanently affordable that flipped onto market rate and was no longer permanently affordable. And that frustration, coupled with the inspiration and North Star of the permanently affordable community land trust model, was what galvanized them to found the organization. And in their foresight now, we're over 20 years running. What really happened in their origin story was that at first people were like, you want to do affordable housing in West Marin? And they were sort of laughed out of living rooms. Like, there's just no way you're going to be able to acquire properties. And so then the founders got together again and they said, well, let's just like say, what does it cost at the time 20 years ago to buy a house? And if we want to do, say, 50 houses over, a 25-year period, what might that look like? And so today, thanks to their work, we got to a path where we're now at 30 units of housing that's under management or ownership, rental, some home ownership. Thank you. Yeah. And then we also engage the community on doing their own affordable housing through a community rentals program. So not all of it has to be paid by the land trust. You can also engage in the existing housing stock to get other landowners to help you get there. It's not permanently affordable, right? Because ultimately landlords are then running it, but you can lean in the community to help too. So I just all that to say, like what they really helped is that they said, okay, what would it take to get to 30 units, for example, and break it down by year. And I think that when they started to have like, hey, this is doable, let's just get our first house and then we'll build on that momentum year over year. So if you're starting out, you can have the big picture and then just remember you start with that first house, right? And that starts to make it real. And then folks can start to go with you on the journey of acquiring more houses. And that's really the seeds of the momentum that we have today at CLAM. So I'm actually going to skip ahead to one of our other projects first. Where do I point this thing? You do really have to push hard on this. Okay. So the Coast Guard project, for those of you that have been coming to the conference, you've probably heard about the, I'll just start at the top in case you haven't. The Coast Guard project, as it sounds, was originally built by the Coast Guard. They decided to vacate the property, and then the federal government was deciding what to do with it. They conveyed it to the county of Marin. And then CLAM put in an application to take ownership of that property in a joint venture with a major housing developer. So the county conveyed the land to CLAM and Eden Housing in a joint venture. It's a big site, 33 acres, 15 buildings. We're looking to do a low-income housing tax credit, LIHTC deal as it's called, 54 units, about $54 million. So it's a big project, one of the biggest affordable housing projects in West Marin, I think, in its history. It's inherently complex, partly because of all the conveyance of the land that took a long time, coupled with then a LIHTC deal in and of itself is super complex. So here comes the challenge is that the community has been really frustrated with how long it's taking, right? Because it takes a long time to get the deal over the finish line. And so our director of properties, Tom McCafferty, is here. Say hi, Tom. So Tom's been leading the deal. So can we give him a round of applause? Because he's been working really hard on this. And by the way, if there's specific questions that I can't answer, Tom has my back. So in the Q&A, if you want really specific answers, he can help us out. But what we ended up doing was saying, rather than waiting until the other challenge was that we anticipated a funding gap. Let me walk you through that a little bit. So we had plenty of county support, we had some donor support, and we had some community foundation money. to help initiate the deal. But when you're going to a tax credit, you need to have a very competitive application to unlock the federal dollars, right? It's a competitive process. We saw that we were going to have well over a $10 million gap. And so what I want to talk to you about is like strategy, right? So we were sitting here with our partner saying, we have a $10+ million gap. Do we keep waiting to talk about our goal until we say we're going to go for whatever tax credit application? There's 2 windows a year, usually, sometimes 3, I think, Tom, depending on what they decide. But basically, we said, let's tell the community when the next opportunity is to apply and then rally everyone to do that. So the next opportunity for us is February of next year. So we made the strategic decision to say, rather than trying to get all our ducks in a row and then talk about it publicly, let's bring the community along with us with the backup plan that if we can't get local and state dollars together, we would try to fundraise the gap, giving the community the opportunity to help dictate the pace. So what we ended up doing that I think was so helpful to this deal is that we were super clear with decision makers about what the blocking issues were, what were the challenges to the project. One example was that we needed project-based vouchers. We were looking for $8 million in project-based vouchers, Section 8 vouchers. Unfortunately, that was oversubscribed. Many of your counties probably have the same issue where those project-based vouchers are oversubscribed. How do we fill that gap, right? We started looking into CERNA. So we outlined to the county executive, our elected representatives, the local foundation, these are the challenges. The vouchers was one of them. And we tried to push to see if we could get some guarantee of vouchers from the county, and they were not able to do that, but they were well aware of our gap. And a couple things have happened. We found out we were eligible for CERNA, so we started to go after it, right? We told the county, hey, the only county and Marin Community Foundation, the only way we're going to be competitive for CERNA is if you help us close the gap to CERNA, right? That's the state funding mechanism through HCD, which Liliana had referenced for some of your projects. And so because we were clear about our challenges and needs, what ended up happening gratefully is that the county rallied with us with soft debt, basically, low interest loans, kind of de-risked in many ways for the project. And they rallied with 9.5 million in a unanimous vote from the Board of Supervisors to make us competitive for that in spring of this year, right? And then Marin Community Foundation also did another $1 million grant, getting us over the $10 million number. We got a successful, thanks to Eden, this is also important for land trusts, is if you partner with a major developer, then they can bring their expertise to bear. So we need to help galvanize and drive local resources, but then you have this major partner that can help Tom and I actually get a competitive CERN application in, right? So we were able to apply in spring, and then I'm happy to report that we just found out 2 weeks ago that we got awarded $11.55 million toward the project, right? So it's incredible, because the project is now pacing toward a competitive federal tax credit application, and we can actually hopefully break ground soon. It's also important because West Marin is rural, and there's a big question about not only a local workforce, but particularly local farm worker housing and how we can drive affordable rents for local farm workers and maintain the vibrancy and diversity and workforce in West Marin. And so about half of our properties, because they're CERNA funded, will now be set aside for those households. So happy to answer more questions about that, but it actually connects to what else is happening in West Marin. And that is that because it is a rural community, we have a lot of ranches, and ranches in many ways have become like the last bastion of affordable housing, but that doesn't always mean that the housing is good or sustainable. And we're seeing that one of our sister organizations, Billings Community Land Trust, has been doing incredible work at Belinda Vista. Let's give them a round of applause. I don't know if anybody's here, but Annie O'Connor and Kiko and the team have taught us a lot about their experiences. But what we're facing in CLAM's territory along Tamales Bay is that one ranch with over 10 families is red tagged, which means that in the county's eyes, they are deemed homeless because they're living in such substandard housing, which you don't think about when you're driving through parts of Marin, but all of our counties have this. You just don't see it, right? And if you do, then and it's like, it's hard, like homelessness. And then in addition to that, there's another over nearly 30 families in the National Park Service land. It's the Point Reyes National Seashore, that just reached a settlement for the closure of longstanding leases for ranch families and the farm workers. So suddenly CLAM is the focal point with partners, but the focal point of how are we going to solve this problem by developing 40 units of housing in like 18 months. Now remember, 40 units of housing, that's more than we've done in 25 years. So it's a big ask. And the good news is that all of our partners are rallying. It's not just needs to do this. We're partnering with our other community land trusts to say, how can we operate across the region? Hal is one of our partners from Two Valleys Community Land Trust. Let's give it up for Hal. We've been looking at how can we just look in all of West Marin and figure out what market-based opportunities and what interim housing opportunities there are. And the portfolio approach, we need to look at 10 different properties to get to 40 units. And I can just tell you that that's going to cost 20 to $30 million. But having discussions with major philanthropists and foundations at scale about a portfolio can be really helpful to inspiring larger gifts. So I just want to recommend that when you're trying to tackle especially big urgent problems, try to be ambitious. It's scary, but try to be ambitious. I mean, we still have a long way to go. So I'm not by any means saying that we're successful. I hope that next year we can say that we are. But I can tell you that folks are rallying. This is so urgent. And I'll just tell you one quick project. We just closed on a 1 acre lot in downtown Point Reyes Station. With the idea that with the county declared an emergency shelter declaration. And with that emergency shelter declaration, it allows for alternative uses like expedited permitting, using tiny homes on wheels to bring them in. So interim housing idea there. And what's really cool about the deal is in the purchase and sale agreement, county, so we had to buy the land for $1.3 million from an individual seller. The county is buying it from us because of the appraised value at 1.1 million. It's a little weird, but stay with me, because then they put a reversion on there, a reverter, meaning that the close of the interim housing, the land goes back to CLAM essentially for free. So they're effectively at the outset investing 1.1 million in the project, and they will be investing more alongside individual gifts and Marin Community Foundation, West Marin Fund, and other philanthropists. So that's just one example of how these things can kind of come together around a really big issue. So that's a little bit about strategizing with local funders, and I'm happy to answer other questions. Wrong way. And that's still the wrong way. This is the right way. There we go. And then the last thing I'll talk about, and I've hearkened to this a little bit, is the power of regional collaboration. So the report that you see there is actually from a bunch of our local funders and partners articulating what many of us working in housing already know in West Marin, and this is probably no different than many of the communities you operate in, which is basically there is a ton of need. It's particularly affecting vulnerable communities, people of color, essential workers. And so it's powerful in that it brings a whole region together, and it was commissioned by our funders and partners. And so then it's like, okay, well, how are we all going to do this together, right? And so the local land trusts, TVCLT, Willingness Community Land Trust, CLAM, we're all working together as a programmatic collaborative called the West Marin Housing Club. There's a collaborative program. CLAM administers it, but we all do basically budget making with shared technical assistance dollars from our fund. With the theory that we can actually get more technical assistance dollars together and we can make a bigger impact. So that's everything from sharing certain positions, like a senior project planner is a position that we'll be hiring for soon. If you know anybody that's in the Bay Area that might want to work with us on some really cool projects, please follow us and share that opportunity, because we're going to be hiring soon, and that will be a collaborative role, right? You could share in fundraising efforts or communication strategies. So just when you look in your region, collaboration, I think you mentioned this, Liliana, moves at the speed of trust. So you have to keep building trust with your ecosystem. But once it's there, you can do more together. So I'd be happy to share a bit more about what that collaborative structure is looking like in West Marin. Thank you so much, and I'll hand it over to Betsy.
Quick announcement. Thank you, Jarrod, for sharing about this report. It's actually, I checked the site and it's available in English and Spanish. So looking forward to that read, and I will add it to the materials that we share with you guys, and I'll also attach it on the HUVA schedule so you have it handy.
You want the... Oh, no, I'll use this one. Thank you.
Okay, well, good morning, everyone. As Lydia mentioned, my name is Betsy McGovern-Garcia. I'm the Vice President of Self-Help Enterprises. And more importantly, I am also the Executive Director of the Bakersfield Community Land Trust. Just a bit of our background in why we were selected to administer the Bakersfield Community Land Trust. Our organization, Self-Help Enterprises, has been working to support communities and create healthy, vibrant communities in the San Joaquin Valley for 60 years. We were incorporated in 1965 when a group of 3 farm worker families wanted to improve their housing conditions. And we pioneered the mutual self-help method of home construction, where families work together in groups of 9 to 11 families to build their own home. They work 40 hours a week, and that creates sweat equity. They provide about 70% of the construction labor, which makes that homeownership opportunity affordable to the families in those groups. We've developed about 66, actually over 6,600 single family homeownership units through this program. We're also an active builder, owner, operator of affordable rental housing. So the low income housing tax credit program that Jarrod mentioned really is the bane of my existence. We live and die by the cycles and the rounds and the awards. But because of that involvement with those very complicated funding programs, we've been able to develop over 3,000 units over roughly 61 communities in the San Joaquin Valley. We also are active in the water space, which is kind of atypical and unique for a housing provider. We have an emergency services team that at one point in the height of the drought was delivering water to 1,500 households. We do clean drinking water in school, and we provide technical assistance for water and wastewater in small communities, groupings of 12 families, often farm worker families in very rural, disadvantaged communities, helping them improve their infrastructure and sometimes consolidate with larger systems. So you can synthesize everything that we do into basically water and wastewater. In October of 2023, the Bakersfield City Council established the Bakersfield Community Land Trust. There were 2 main goals, and I think it's really important for any new community land trust to understand the why behind their work. One obvious goal is affordability and creating affordable ownership opportunities and affordable rental opportunities. But really for them, it was because there were several key tracks in Bakersfield where LA and out of town developers had come in and bought up virtually all of the homeownership, all of the single family inventory in those census tracts. So across the city, the average rate of homeownership is probably 50%, around 50%. And in some of these census tracts, it was like 0.2%. And so really it's an opportunity to stabilize the economic base of those census tracts and bring back home ownership, community pride, community investment, and all of the things that really make our communities vibrant. So in November, they issued or they approved $6.5 million for the Bakersfield Community Land Trust. Those are ARPA dollars. They have very stringent expenditure timelines. And in December, they issued an RFP. We picked up this RFP and we're like, great, we can build some home ownership housing in Bakersfield. This is our jam. And we kind of skipped over all of the CLT administration and formation and structure and insurance and all of the things. And we signed up and they picked us. So all of a sudden, overnight, we're like, okay, crash course in CLTs. We've got to figure out all the things. We've got to get D&O insurance and general liability. We've got to get course of construction once we start building. We've got to have personnel, operating policies, board governance. We run the board meetings, the agendas, everything. So really just dove in. We were in a raft floating down a river trying to figure out CLTs. In a short amount of time, we have been able to move forward several projects. There's about 40 properties that the city of Bakersfield owns that are in a variety of census tracts throughout the city. Most of these are old redevelopment properties or blighted properties. You know, we went and toured them, and there's homes that were partially burned down where the family didn't have the resources to rebuild. Very, very visually blighted properties throughout the city. Many of them have been on the city's rolls for 20 to 30 years because they are not feasible for the market to develop these properties. And most of them are in low opportunity, disadvantaged census tracts. So, one of the first things we acknowledge is that we value housing mobility, housing choice, and economic mobility. And so, purchase 3 homes in high opportunity census tracts to create the opportunity for families to choose. Maybe they want to be in a certain school district. Maybe it's near their employment. Maybe it's near a family member who's their caregiver, creating the opportunity for choice and mobility. So 3 of those have closed escrow. We had our first lottery with one of those ball spinners. Um, because we have over 200 families that within the first 45 days contacted us interested in the program. You have to close the thing on the ball spinner. The balls will bounce everywhere in your lottery. I don't recommend that. So we're constantly learning, but have the first two into escrow. And then we are working diligently daily to get an additional 10 properties into our ownership. One of our strategies is to pick some foundational building products and master plan check those. So you only have to go through building plan check once. And so we've done that for 2 of the 3 products. And then we'll be able to file a plot plan and within 2 weeks get a building permit on all of these scattered sites throughout the city. So think about economies of scale, think about approaches that really streamline your development. We're also working with the lender community trying to get our 99-year land lease, our purchase and sale agreement approved so that we can move forward these properties. Just a mix of where the properties, the first grouping came from. One was bought by the ARPA former redevelopment sites, and then actually 6 were tax default sites. Don't think that tax default sites are easy because you will have title clearance issues. If the county didn't do this properly on the tax default, you will not be able to get title insurance. So pay attention if you're inheriting or buying tax default sites because that can be an issue. All of the city sites will have an affordability restriction that overlays on our affordability restriction. Really encourage you to think about the form of affordability restriction. Most CLTs automatically say straight out of the gates, it's got to be a resale restriction because we want to control the affordability in perpetuity. For us, we really also want to promote economic mobility and wealth building for low income families. And we want to raise the tide of the economic profile of the census tract. So if we simply put 80% AMI families in the census tract and only let them sell to 80% AMI families, we're doing nothing to raise the economic base of that census tract. So we're actually doing initial sale at 80% AMI and then allowing resales up to 120% of AMI. And then there's some other nuances for sales with equity share to really help improve communities. We'll skip that guy because I think I'm short on time. Oh. So here's just a sample of the product that we're building, 2-story product. We are taking single family housing and putting it on 25-foot lots, so a 2,500 square foot lot. Really pushing the city using the state density bonus law to do 0 lot lines and higher density development. Many of the older lots are rear loaded alleys, and so we're also planning for future accessory dwelling units. This is our single story product. We never want to go into a neighborhood that is all single family housing and put in a 3-story multifamily rental community that looms over the neighbors. And so really considerate of the context of the surrounding community. And then a little bit about resources. So I talked about the 6.5 million of ARPA. It's really important to understand your funding deadlines. Liliana talked about the federal funds and the documentation requirements. With federal funds, there are also new BABA, Buy American, Build American requirements. So if you're buying switchgear, that needs to be procured in the United States, and that can be very, very challenging. COC Builds is another federal program, and they require you to run all your residents through a federal database, of which the state of California does not use and does not endorse. So now more than ever, really understand the requirements of your federal programs. In our case, we have to spend $6.5 million in 2 years. Fortunately, we're very good at spending money, but that means you have to really understand your secondary financing structure. So we're going to pay to build the homes, and then we're also going to pay to give a $150,000 secondary loan into escrow. So the full sale of the property then revolves back to us. We've met that expenditure deadline, and we can then invest those dollars into future real estate activities. Conversely, you may not have secondary funds available. You may choose to do a seller carryback or inflate the value of the land to make it affordable at a mortgage price that meets the low income requirements. So really just understand your funding and what you're trying to accomplish. For us, it's a really aggressive expenditure deadline. And then, we made a bunch of investments into the organizational structure. We're going to be taking developer fee, and that's going to be seed money to operate the BCLT in the future. We're charging a nominal administration fee and loan underwriting fee, but you really have to think about the long-term operations of your CLT. And then some funding that's available. There's a home ownership supernova. Joe Cerna Farmer Core Housing Grant was mentioned in the Cal Home program. Let me tell you guys that the state of California is actively working on a housing bond. The governor allocated resources out of the general fund and put, I think, 200 million into home ownership. And much of that money was sent to CalHFA for the Dream for All program, which is absolutely a great program, but it is not a housing production program. And I talked to Housing California about the need to invest in CLTs, invest in home ownership, invest in our communities. And what they said to me is we need Habitat for Humanity at the table, right? Habitat for Humanity carries the political power to get some of these things through, like housing bonds. And I say we need CLTs at the table, right? If you're working in your communities and you're advancing home ownership opportunities or rental housing opportunities, we really need you at the table for the housing bond. So encourage you to work with me or Housing California, and we can plug you into those efforts. That's the only way we're going to have more funding and programs like Cal Home and Cerna. Federal Home Loan Bank, San Francisco Federal Home Loan Bank has a WISH program. Many banks, including Tri-Counties Banks and Mechanics Bank, have allocation of WISH funding. That's $15,000 a family. They also have the Affordable Housing Program, which can be paired with rental housing. So find a local bank and apply for the Federal Home Loan Bank. Permanent local housing allocation dollars are local dollars, they're state dollars that are allocated to the local governments. They are not federal. Really great funding. It's flexible. You can do ADUs, workforce housing, CLTs, home ownership, and then CDBG and home, which are the least favorite on my list in this immediate moment, but also very vital resources for our communities. And I think that is it. We've got some next steps, but I've talked about our CLT and my contact information. So want to give time to open it up for questions.
Thank you. Wonderful content. And we have 15 minutes for a Q&A. And I just want to say happy birthday to Mirna Garcia, our colleague from South Tower CLT. And I'll be running the mic around the room. And you guys have another mic here. Yeah. Please just raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you if you have questions for speakers.
Good morning. Thank you for sharing. I'm BU with the Partnership for the Bay's Future Fellowship right now. And I'm curious, a few things actually, Jarrod. You said y'all got or just awarded 11.5 million. I might have missed what the source of that was.
Yeah, that was the Joe Cerna Jr. fund, the HCD funding, that's for farm worker housing. And that was the rental program. They have a home ownership and rental. So it's for rental.
Thank you. Excellent.
Yeah, and that
mhm.
funding is through the California Multifamily Supernova. So you'll find it that way. And that also has multifamily housing program funds, infill infrastructure grant, and transit-oriented development funding. So there's multiple funding programs available under that Supernova.
Thank you. So another thing I'm doing in this fellowship is being asked to help create new innovative financial products. I don't know how to do that, but I'm curious based on your experience, if you got to create your own financial product, given what's out there and what you need and the challenges that you have, what would you make? And how would that look?
So I have one, it's not exactly CLTs, but we really have a need for financing that is construction to perm. We can do a sweat equity model in an urban environment where USDA funds are not available. Also, it'd be really helpful to be able to lend on ITINs and not be under the federal government's lending products. And so having a mortgage that is construction to perm convertible where the interest rate is set and the certainty that the homeowner will be eligible at the end of construction would be really, really helpful. And then I think just encouraging lenders to lend on CLTs, get to know your CLTs, find out what their model is, talk to them. We are running our 99-year land lease through Fannie Mae. They do have a checklist you can get certified to list you on their website. And then that gives your lenders confidence for the secondary market. But getting to know your community-based CLTs and what their borrowing needs are.
So the question was kind of like, what financial products do we wish we had also? Yeah, I've got ideas. We were discussing this during the CDFI workshop yesterday too, but I think that a lot of what I feel we're seeing right now is we're having to be very creative in some patchwork solutions because there's some very big structural problems. I think one structural thing that comes up even with CDFI work is what is the takeout or what's the long-term loan? So I think a housing bond where if we had predictable access to low interest rates, that allows us to then do affordable housing. If it's commercial rates, it's really hard to do affordable housing without constantly hitting up local funders, right? So there's a bit of a cycle there that I would just love to see us all rally to break because I think that it gets so much easier. And that report that I showed, the Growing Together report says that just West Marin, like just one little subset of our big state needs about 1,000 units of affordable workforce housing to maintain vitality and economic justice. Let's just assume ballpark, I'm just a napkin, like writing on a napkin with you. Let's just say it's $500,000 per unit. If the math is right, that's $500 million to get to 1,000 units. Let's just say that's over the next 20 years. Well, like to forecast that, we need some predictable programmatic mechanisms to get there. The county is rallying. We get about $100,000 per unit in the county of Marin for affordable housing through Measure W, which is a transient occupancy tax, as well as 50,000 from housing trust. So that's how we get to 100. They could go a little bit higher, but that's still not enough subsidy to then justify commercial lending, right? So I'm kind of simplifying, but that is one. I think another thing to try to get to lower AMI is like this might be a little that's probably not controversial in this audience, but like universal basic income would really help because then we have security in affordability for the developers, right? So that's like another systemic thing. Those are just two, and I'd be happy. I have like a whole long wish list I could talk to you about.
Just to build on the comment of below market interest capital, if banks are also CDFIs, they should look at the capital magnet fund competition. We've been able to get $9.5 million of free capital that we've been able to revolve in and out of our projects. The Rural California Assistance Council, RCAC, has gotten big buckets of CMF as a CDFI, and then they can lend that at 1 to 3% and often make grants into projects, which allows you to leverage that with your market rate capital to extend and make projects feasible. So that would be another option of below market capital.
My name is Mirna Garcia. I'm with South Tower Community Land Trust. And one of the things that we have our first house on the market. on Ferris here in Fresno. And the challenge has been finding a bank that will take it on. And that's a little frustrating because we're in a room full of people that can make it happen. And so I'm curious, when is a round table going to be formed to discuss how we're going to make it happen? Because Betsy, you're absolutely correct, right? We need to push the envelope. We have to think outside the box. We continue to do the same thing over and over, and it's not going to work for the housing crisis that we're facing. If we continue to do the same thing over and over, our unhoused population is going to increase under this administration. And so, what are we going to do as a collaborative group to change that and push back on our funders to help us resolve this issue?
So one option, Mirna, happy birthday. Also shout out because Mirna recently sold 17 of our new markets tax credit homeownership units and did a phenomenal job. But two things I think on this point. One, I think Rise Economy is here at the conference and they do a lot of works with holding banks accountable. And so getting CLTs and unique ownership structures and land trusts into those plans, I think is absolutely crucial. Secondly, if you haven't, you should run your land lease and your sales documents through the Fannie Mae checklist. We can work with you guys on that. We do have lenders who are captive, who are interested and who are able to lend on land trusts, so we can also connect you with those folks.
I would also say that, sharing the challenges with some of the key stakeholders, everybody, like, whether it's a county supervisor or, electeds in town, but just articulating as clearly as you can, what are the blockers, or getting the bank to say, but for these few things that if you could get a little bit more funding here to close the gap to be, so I think, whether it's a memo, I know this is really boring office speak, but it can help when you're sharing it with a bunch of stakeholders to get everybody on the same sheet of music and then try to rally them to help you solve those problems. I mean, that was the case with even something like the Coast Guard project that we talked about was like, we'd spent a lot of time on like 2 to 3 pages to articulate where we're at and what we need. And so getting your partners huddled around that can also be really helpful.
Thank you. We have time for one or two more questions. And I just want to thank everyone for uplifting the need to partner with government. City, county government play key role as some of the partnerships that are crucial for some of these community developments to continue becoming a reality. As far as the bank and all the lenders attending this event, um, your investments in affordable housing, including community land trusts, count as credits for your Community Reinvestment Act commitments. So please continue partnering with the community land trust. It's really, really crucial to have all those partnerships to make it happen. And we have another question here.
Hi, I'm Jamie Penn. I'm with the Beverly, Vermont Community Land Trust as a board elected treasurer. I'm just curious, I know there's a lot of funding for acquisition development, but our current situation is we have been on the ground for 30 years, and through a commitment of maintaining ultra affordable housing, we didn't quite keep up with like capital expenditures in the way that we should have. What funding opportunities are there for infrastructure within a building that's been retrofitted, electrical, plumbing, if any?
First, yeah.
Is it homeownership housing or rental?
It's multifamily.
Multifamily
It is
rental.
technically a limited equity housing co-op.
Okay, yeah, so the first two sources I would probably look at is whether or not your city or county has any home or CDBG community development block grant. Both of those allow rehab projects on rental housing. Also, you could have the ability to syndicate under the low income housing tax credit program. There's language in the qualified allocation plan about scattered site projects that you would pair together. They have two pools. They have an at-risk pool if your affordability covenants are expiring within 5 years, and they have a preservation pool that anyone can apply for. But really, I would start with your city or county. PLHA is also a really good source that they should have available. And so start with them and go in for rehab dollars, and then plan for replacement investments. Our minimum standard is 500 per unit per year. And then that builds up over time and is available if there's major investments that are needed in the future.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that you know, I think we've had a pretty strong eye for stewardship and building property reserves, but even then we just did capital needs assessment and the last two annual inspections had one of our biggest lists to date of needs of properties. And so we invested really heavily in stewardship. So we're also looking at it as like a fundraising opportunity of like being stewards and replenishing those reserves faster than waiting for the rents to build it up. And I know it's really important to the county as a partner. I mean, for our tenants, obviously, and our residents, but also for the county, that we are being great stewards and that people are living in dignified housing. So you know, we're going to do that this year. In addition to our basic annual operating expenses, we're including for our fundraising additional stewardship dollars to replace the reserves faster. And I think it's beautiful because it's showing that you're thinking about generational work and stewardship. So look at that line item and that concern as an opportunity to rally folks around, you know, fulfilling your mission. And I think that BCLT partnered with SFCLT, if I'm not mistaken, on their capital needs assessment, also to sort of get the picture of the funding needs, and then you know, can use that as a funding opportunity. Yeah.
Just one more thing. Your city or county has a housing element, and that should be developed with stakeholder public participation and input. If the preservation of housing units is a high need within your community, find a way to get involved in that effort, comment on that, and request that they put a program in their housing element for the preservation of affordable housing units. And that can help you build the political will to get future allocations of funding.
John Wellman with the Central California Land Trust. New in position, prefacing this question by that. So, Betsy, you talked about different forms of affordability on the resale piece, which I believe is important as well, giving various options. Can you give me a little more insight as to how to balance that with the 80% AMI, the 120% or an equity share, when you've got ARPA funds that, as I understand it, are highly restrictive? So when you're starting out, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, let me just say that there's absolutely no regulation in ARPA, home, or CDBG or low income housing tax credits, but that's rental. But anyways, ARPA, home, CDBG that mandates a resale restriction. The only carryover of mandated resale restrictions are under redevelopment. So if the site was a housing successor site previously owned by redevelopment, that still carries a 45-year resale restriction. Those programs allow you to have the flexibility on what the affordability covenant is. There's three general types of affordability covenants. One is recapture. So you make a loan to somebody, it's deferred over the life of when they live in the unit. They sell the unit, they repay that to you, sometimes with interest, and then that money is used to invest in a future affordable housing unit. We love this model. It allows the family to capture all the equity in the homeownership unit. It rises the economic tide of their family and empowers them to move on and move up into other housing situations. The second is a straight resale restriction. So you tie it to the federal definition of income. Incomes go up, the resale price goes up in accordance with income, and you can restrict who they resell to. In our case, our board wanted a resale restriction, so we're doing a resale restriction, but from 80 to 120% AMI. And then we'll have a wait list. We already have 200 families on the wait list. We'll work with them. We'll make available secondary financing. So hopefully the resale goes to another family that has deeper income targeting. The third is an equity share. You can sell to whomever, but part of the sales price is going to go back to me. So in easy numbers, the sale's 150,000, the land is 50,000 of that, or you hold back 50,000, you would get 1/3 of the equity on the resale. So equity share, recapture, and resale restriction, and understanding the differences of those is very important.
So that's a wrap for this Q&A. Thank you again to our wonderful speakers. And thank you to our participants for a very dynamic Q&A. I really enjoyed it. I always learn more at all these workshops. And we're going to have another workshop before lunch. Lunch today will be 12:30 to 1:30. Please don't miss the plating. And there's 2 more segments of workshops before the closing at 4. Thank you.